And I'm watching as the spider basically is crawling sideways through the air. And I had to be like, the physics just broke. It was a joke. But I was like, that's amazing. I've experienced the thrill of discovery from a purely Christian creationist standpoint that says, I think God did something on purpose, and this is amazing to watch. I've loved studying out epigenetics. I've loved studying out chemistry. I've loved these fields. It's cool. So this idea that our kids are going to lack the ability to make discoveries and experience that joy, no. That has absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. All right, welcome to the Janus Project. We are continuing with Creation Week, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed the content so far. If you have someone you know who's interested in this topic, or you think they need to hear this topic, I'm going to ask you to like this video, subscribe, put a comment below, and then share it with them. All right, I'm not looking to start arguments. I am not looking to start fights, but I am looking to start discussions. I am looking to have people say, I have never thought of it like that. And so I know there are things that I have taught this issue. I have studied this issue for years. That's why I can conclusively say, in my humble opinion, Bill Nye does not understand creationism. So as I've listened to this book, what caused me to say I need to do a chapter-to-chapter review of this book is exactly because I don't think he understands what creationists believe. Admittedly, a lot of creationists do not understand evolution. They do not understand what evolutionists believe. That is why you will hear creationists say things like, well, I mean, if we evolved from monkeys, why do you still have monkeys? That's not a good argument, just in case you know. You will have other creationists who will say things like, well, Darwin recanted on his deathbed. It's not a good argument either. And so those are some arguments that creationists will make that I'll say, they're just not good arguments. Don't use those. Okay? But there are evolutionists out there who claim to speak authoritatively, and we are just the conclusive, and they don't know. They don't know what they're talking about when it comes to creation. So what I want to do is I want to explain what creationists actually believe and use that to kind of refute what Bill Nye says in his book. Now, we are on to Chapter 2. And in Chapter 2, he is doing a summary of the great creationism debate. And he is specifically responding to things that Ken Ham and others have said, specifically there at the debate, and some of the comments and things like that. If you have not watched my previous video on this issue, you would be advised to at least go back and watch the prologue video where I introduced this whole topic, because you will then know what the debate was about. You will also know what Ken Ham had to say and what Bill Nye had to say, at least vaguely. I think Ken Ham did a really good job of responding to a lot of the questions that were raised. I think there were things Bill Nye just didn't understand. And so Bill Nye would bring up comments or bring up questions, and they had already been answered or they had already been debunked, and he didn't recognize that. I think that's a sincere representation of his point. He did not understand some of the stuff that was being presented because he didn't understand creation. Now, as he continues, again, we're here in Chapter 2. He starts out, he says, for those readers who might be deeply religious, welcome. I very much hope you make it through this chapter. It is about my recent debate with a creationist in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which in many ways was the impetus for me to write this book. Our issue was whether or not creationism is viable, the term agreed upon. So that was the premise of the debate. That's the thesis of the debate. And the affirmative is saying, yes, it is. And the negative is basically saying, no, it isn't. And so Ken Ham was trying to say, yes, creationism is viable. And Bill Nye was trying to say, no, it wasn't. Okay? Now, he says, I did not disparage anyone's religion. Okay, I did not mention anything about the Bible, no reference to Jesus from the city of Nazareth. I was and I remain concerned about the extraordinary claim that the earth is extraordinarily young, which is an assault on not just evolution, but on the whole public understanding of science. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. I will comment on it as we go throughout. He gets into deep time a whole lot. I have a lot of things to say about it, but I'm not going to get into it because too many of the guys I respect can still prove creationism and not go after deep time. If you don't know what deep time is, it's the billions and billions of years thing. a vast number, I'm not even going to say majority because I don't know, but a vast number of creationists are what we call young earth creationists, which they believe that the earth was created between 6 and 10,000 years ago. They get this from the genealogies in the Bible. That is one place where they get it. They will also get it from the rejection of carbon dating, which can date back to about 50,000 years or so. But they'll also reject radiometric dating, which is flawed in a lot of ways. And so those are some of the reasons why they say they do not accept the billions and billions of years. Now, as he keeps going, he says this. He goes through some of the non-profit issues and all of that. And yeah, that has nothing to do either here nor there. But he says this. In the case of creationism, however, certain not-for-profit groups set out to indoctrinate our science students in their central idea that the first book of the Bible's assertion that Earth is only 6 to 10,000 years old, the exact number depends on their interpretation, is supported by scientific evidence. Such an idea is laughable and could easily dismissed were it not for the political influence of these groups. Now, they may have political influence. I don't know. But the fact is, the fact that you are not allowed to teach creationism in schools, and in some cases, you cannot even present information that doubts the accepted standard of evolution. See a previous video for that. I don't know how much political clout they actually have. They have religious ability, and so they are given some religious exceptions. But I don't know what they're talking about with the political influence of these groups. Again, in general, creationist groups do not accept evolution as a fact of life. It's not just that they don't understand how evolution led to the ancient dinosaurs, for example. They take it to another step and deny that evolution happened at all anywhere, let alone that it is happening today. Pause right there. This is where Bill Nye does not understand creationism, because creationists believe in evolution. We do. Now, he will reference this later on in the book where he says, oh, they'll use some, convoluted terms here. No, there is such a thing where we observe evolution on the micro scale. We observe changes within a species, but we never observe a change from one species into a completely different kind. There are times where two species are going to get trapped on either side of an island, for instance, and they will no longer be able to reproduce with each other because they've genetically drifted far enough apart. But it is not comparable to this creature, which was a dog, becoming this creature, which is now a cat. Like, in the case of speciation, where you're trapped on either side of an island, you can still reproduce with the original group. That happens. That is what we see, and we believe it because it is empirical. But this idea that you wait long enough and a bacteria will eventually become a man, or something that was ancestor to a bacteria will eventually become something that was ancestor to a man. We don't see that because we don't have enough time to observe it. We can bring up the fossil record, which is grossly incomplete. Later on, he'll bring up the idea that, oh man, if all the animals landed on Mount Ararat, and so you had kangaroos coming from Mount Ararat all the way over to Australia, and they migrated that distance, and they never left behind any bodies or fossils. He will then later on in the book say, our fossil record is woefully missing everything. It's extremely rare for something to fossilize. And he'll give the standards for what is required for something to fossilize. But early in the book, he mocked the idea that we don't find fossils of kangaroos. Well, the fact might be, like you said, things do not fossilize easily. And if they're migrating, they're not going to leave a whole lot behind. I don't know. I'm just saying there are reasons in your own book where you present explanation for why we might not see the things you say we don't see. Now, again, continue on here. Again, creationists do believe in evolution. We just don't believe in the molecules to man style of evolution. We believe that there is evolution within a kind. We believe in epigenetics and all of that. That is empirical science. If you want more explanation, I'm going to refer you back to a previous episode of the Janus Project. Okay, he goes on and he says this, inherent in this rejection of evolution is the idea that your curiosity about the world is misplaced and your common sense is wrong. Now again, most common sense is, I look, I see design, I expect a designer. So your common sense is actually right in this case. Now, the attack on reason is an attack on us all. Children who accept this ludicrous perspective will find themselves opposed to progress. Like I said, the belief in evolution has absolutely nothing to do with the modern technological advancements. That's one of the things Ken Ham kept trying to pressure Bill Nye with, is what modern technological marvel would not have been possible without evolution. So you think about getting to space, you think about electric cars, you think about telephones, you think about MRIs, all of this stuff. Which one of those technologies could not have been invented by a creationist? As I said in a previous episode, if you acknowledge the idea of creation, it means this world is orderly and has a design to it, so therefore I'm going out to find the design. If you believe in evolution, you believe this world is a product of chance, and therefore there are things that you see out there that could just be a product of leftover. That's where vestigial organs came from. So again, they will not be left behind. They are not opposed to progress. Okay, not only that, these kids will never feel the joy of discovery that science brings. They will, because most great scientists through the years believed there was a creator, and they were doing this in honor of him. They will have to suppress the basic human curiosity that leads to asking questions, exploring the world around them, and making discoveries. I teach science all the time from a creationist Christian perspective, and I love science. I don't know what you're talking about. I remember there was this one time I'm sitting there watching a spider, and I had always wondered how spiders got from here to there. Like, did they climb up and over? Like, how did that happen? And as I watched this spider, it started shooting out loads and loads of web out of its abdomen. And it was so cool to watch as it just pumped out massive amounts of web. And I realized that day, that's how they do it. The spider will sit there and just start shooting web into the wind, and it'll go out and it'll form an anchor point. And then that spider can climb from the place where it was across a yawning chasm that made no sense to me before I watched. And it could get from here to there. And it did it because it just sprayed webbing. And there was another time I watched the spider. I was sitting on my parents' house at a big, long front porch. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this little baby spider. And it starts ballooning its way backwards, but it's climbing on its web. And the web is being blown that way. And I'm watching as the spider basically is crawling sideways through the air. And I had to be like, the physics just broke. It was a joke. But I was like, that's amazing. I've experienced the thrill of discovery from a purely Christian creationist standpoint that says, I think God did something on purpose, and this is amazing to watch. I've loved studying out epigenetics. I've loved studying out chemistry. I've loved these fields. It's cool. So this idea that our kids are going to lack the ability to make discoveries and experience that joy, no. That has absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. They will miss out on the countless exciting adventures. We are robbing them of basic knowledge about their world and the joy that comes with it. It breaks my heart. I'm sorry, you just don't understand creation. I'm sorry. I teach little kids science, and I talk about the Bible and science and how it all ties together, and you don't know what you're talking about. Because I have people come up and they're like, that's awesome. That's so cool. And I'm explaining epigenetics to 5th and 6th graders. And I'm explaining design and the cool features, and we're holding skulls and we're looking at, I don't know what you're talking about. There is abundant knowledge to be had from a creationist standpoint. All right? He talks about how he got there. He talks about this. Now, here's the other part here, and maybe I'll do a whole separate video on this, but he says, we were each given time to make our case before the audience. Mr. Ham holds to a fascinating pair of doublespeak phrases, observational science and historical science. He says that there's a difference between the things that happen while you're alive and watching the things that happened before you were born. So for him, anything in the fossil record is subject to question. For him, any astronomical observation is automatically irrelevant because the stars are older than any person that could have observed them. Perhaps a mischievous deity put them all there in a flash. Using the word science in this Orwellian way is unsettling. As a science educator, I also find this practice deeply irresponsible. Okay, like I said, maybe this requires a whole separate video. Let me know in the comments if that's what you think. But the fact is, science deals with what we can observe. Okay? That's the principle of uniformity. It means what we observe is basically what's always happened. We don't believe God randomly changes the rules throughout time. Bill Nye says that later on in the book. He's just wrong. We do not believe that God just messes with physics when he wants to. Okay? Now there's miracles and he can do things, but God overall will leave science alone to run as it always has. Okay? But this idea of there is a difference. There is a difference. If I am studying the history of something, if I am looking at a rock in the ground, I can make assumptions on it, but since I was not there, I can only make assumptions. Now I realize there are very smart and brilliant scientists, okay, who do the work and who can figure things out. Yes, but scientists interpret the data. Science is the data. So there are scientific principles at work, and scientists do their best to take the principle and look at the thing and make the comparison and come up with a conclusion. But as we have seen in this pandemic, you have science, which says one thing, and scientists are all over the board trying to figure out what actually is the truth. So there is something to be said about observational science, which is, if I water this plant, it grows. But as far as historical science, where this plant came from and who it crossbred with and all of that, there's only assumptions that I can make. I wasn't there. And so when we talk about the origin of the universe, unless you can do an experiment that repeats the origin of the universe, then we have assumptions and we have speculation and we have ideas, but it is by definition historical because we were not there. I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying it's not empirical. We can make experiments to try to prove it. And if they back up what we thought, then good, we might be on the right track. But that's what science is trying to do. The empirical science, the observational science, is the science that we are observing and that we can test and play around with. Historical science are those things that we can't replicate because they only happened once. And we don't believe that a mischievous deity put them all there in the flash. I know that's the caricature that you keep bringing up with fossils. Oh, I mean, God just put the fossils in the ground and there weren't actually those animals. We don't believe that. We believe that there were dinosaurs who were buried and fossilized. The argument is when and how and all of that, but we believe there were dinosaurs. Now, were there a few crackpot Christians throughout the years who believed that dinosaur fossils were a test of faith that God put in the ground to test your faith? Yeah, probably. There have been a lot of Christians through the years who believe some really stupid things. You know why? Because they're humans, and humans believe some stupid things, like evolution. Now, Bill Nye kind of reiterates some of the things he argued. Like I said, if you want a good comparison, read Bill Nye's book, read Ken Ham's book, and you'll get some answers to some of that. His argument is stratigraphy and fossils and all of those things. One of the ones that I enjoyed, and like I said, I think I'm gonna have to do a second video on this one. He talks about layers in the snow. And he says, oh, I mean, there's so many layers in the snow, and therefore, you'd have to lay so many layers per season in order to match the number of years that, if it was a young Earth. I'm no expert in ice cores, but again, there's the Lost Squadron that landed on the ice sheet and got buried under, tons and tons of snow, and they'd only been gone for a very short time. You can look it up, the Lost Squadron there. But the other issue that I have, and again, no expert, but I lived in New Hampshire for a while, and I can tell you the number of layers that were laid down each season was more than one. Every time the snow melts and rehardens, it forms a new layer. So if the snow falls and that snow melts a little bit, it forms a layer. And then if another snowfall lands on top of it and that melts a little bit, you got another layer. That doesn't mean that 30 layers represents 30 seasons. It represents 30 cycles of warming and cooling. And I'm not trying to say I argue with all the scientists, but I'm just saying from my own experience and my own watching, I have seen dozens of layers probably. I didn't sit there and count them all, laid in one season, because I could step out of the school I worked at and I could look at the roof of the gym where a large sheaf of ice had slid off, and the ice was probably a few feet thick, and it had layers upon layers upon layers, and this is what I thought of. So He's saying you would have to have 170 winter-summer seasons for every single year to match the number of ice cores that we had, like the ice core layers. Well, there's an explanation. Again, I'm not sure, but again, we don't even have to have the argument about old or young Earth. I mean, yeah, there's a tree called Old Chico in Sweden that's supposedly 9,000 years old. Now, again, Answers in Genesis is going to have answers to all this. They study this topic out. They have answers to all of these. I'm not going to say they're right all the time, because I don't think they are right all the time. But again, there are answers to these things. Ken Ham tried to present those in the debates, and I don't think Bill Nye understood it. I don't think they got it. Okay. One of the ones that again, he'll bring this up. He'll say, speaking of the Ark itself, I pointed out the very skilled shipwrights in New England built the Wyoming, a 6-masted wooden tall ship. The boat is huge by wooden ship standards, over 100 meters, 300 feet long. The Creationist imagined Ark is said to have been 500 feet long, hold 14,000 animals and 8 people. The real ship, the Wyoming, had a crew of 14. Although it was built by the best shipbuilders in the world, in 1909 they could not manage the inherent elasticity of the wooden timbers and strakes. The Wyoming twisted in rough seas, opened uncontrollable leaks in the hull. She foundered and sank with the loss of all hands. It is best in the modern. If the best in the modern world couldn't build a large seaworthy ship, what reason could anyone have to think that 8 unskilled ancient people could? Except it actually sailed for years before that happened. And when you have a mast in a ship, you have different stresses there. The Ark was not built with a mast in design. It was built just to float with the wind. So the stresses would have been completely different. Okay? But the Wyoming, which was built by expert shipwrights, what makes them expert? Because they lived in New England? Okay. It sailed for years before that happened. I'm just saying, you don't get that picture based on the illustration he gave. And he gave that in the debate, and he gave that later, and he put it here. It sailed for years before it sank, and it had a mast. And the mast is going to add stresses that will cause that ship to sink. So I'm just saying, if you are studying out the feasibility of the Ark, it is not a fair comparison to compare it to a wooden ship that was built. Now, you could say Noah was untrained, but if the dude lived for 600 years, do you think he could get good at something? We don't know how long he spent building the Ark. He could get good at it. So untrained is not fair. Okay. Again, he pointed out the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. has 400 species in 163 acres. 8 unskilled people. Again, who says they're unskilled? How could they keep 14,000 animals alive and well? Again, if they were in some sort of stupor. And again, the Ark, the Answers in Genesis with the Ark encounter and all that, they do give some reasons and feasibility studies. Okay, so they can get some of those. All right, he brings up a lot of different things. The Tiktaalik can have explained some of that. And so those are some of the illustrations he gives. Like I said, you can go back and forth with some other books to give you some answers on all of that. Again, he just has a problem with creationism. He has a problem with something he doesn't fully understand, and that's an issue. We have more we could say about this chapter. Again, if you've read it and you want me to answer any specific illustration points, by all means, but that's just a little bit there. Guys, I've gone long in the tooth, and so I'm going to end the episode here. You have been watching the Janus Project. This is Creation Week, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this material. And like I said, please remember to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, and I will try to communicate with you back and forth. Guys, thank you for joining me. This is the Janus Project, signing out.